Hi, my name is Ben Plessier and I am a fervent user of Wappler. With this video I will show you how easy it is to create the client-side CRUD actions with Wappler. Here I will be tackling the categories module. In the previous video, I created the administration dashboard. In case you missed it, at the end I added two components that will be used throughout this section. These components are called Browser and Notifications. Selecting the Categories page, I first add a data source to the page. The data source, called Server Connect, connects the front end to the API that was created in the second video in this playlist. I name it Categories. Then I select the server action. Under API, I select Products, Categories and Read. I also need a second data source named Data Detail. This date source contains a single record that is filtered from the main data source, using the ID. Data detail will be used when updating and deleting a record. Now to add the create action. For this, I add a new row and column. For laptops and larger, I make this 6 calls wide. Inside the column, I add a button. I change the button text and give it an ID. Change the style. After the button, I add a dynamic collapse with a top margin to keep it away from the button. Add an ID. Then I remove the paragraph to make way for the insert form. The form is inserted by selecting Generators and Bootstrap 5 Form. The server action is selected from the API, Products, Categories and Upsert. The idea is to only insert the name of the category. Therefore I remove the fields that are not required. The form gets an ID. Now comes the fiddly part. The generator creates form inputs with an ID that is prefixed with INP_. This page, when finished, will contain 3 forms created by the generator. The chance that an ID is repeated a number of times is great. Without expanding too much, an ID in a document must be unique. To rectify this, I first copy the INP bit and save the file in order to perform the next bit. I then trundle off to the Search panel under the Site Management tab. Here I paste the search expression. Enter the new expression. Enter the document to search. I then select Find All. This is to make sure that I have not made a mistake. Satisfied, I click on Replace All. The beauty is that all of the occurrences of the original expression have been changed. Now for a button that cancels the action if there has been a change of mind. I add this before the Save button. As with each button, I give it an ID and a style. Then I go down to Dynamic Events and choose the mouse on Click Event. For the action, I choose to hide the dynamic collapse. The text inside the button is changed to reflect the target. I now go back to the Add Category button. First, I correct a spelling mistake. Then I scroll up to Action Toggle where I select Collapse. For the target, I select the Add Category Collapse. Lastly, for this button, I scroll down to Dynamic Attributes, select Input and Disabled. I want this button to be disabled when the collapse is shown. Wappler does not have this as a built-in facility, thus I choose Collapsed. In Code View, I add an exclamation mark. This is the equivalent of saying, "not collapsed." Save the file to see what we have created so far. Exactly as was hoped for. And that is it for the create part of CRUD. Next comes the read part. I add another row with a top margin. Inside the row, a column. I duplicate this column to finish up with 2 columns. For laptops and larger, I make the first column 4 calls wide. Inside the first column, I then add a table by selecting Generators. The table is populated by the Server Connect data source. I make the table responsive, give it a hover effect and make it small. Down in the Table Fields section, I remove all of the fields with the exception of the name. When I click on OK, I see that there are already 2 names in the table. These are categories that I created without you knowing. My apologies for that. And that concludes the read part of CRUD, were it not for me wanting to be able to show the details of a selected category in the second column. As well as showing the details, I also want to give the selected category a different look. So let's go ahead and do that. I select the table row and scroll down to Dynamic Events. Here I choose the mouse on click event. For the action, I choose the data detail date source and select. The key value is set to the ID found under the table repeat. For the appearance of the selected category, I select the table cell and scroll down to Dynamic Attributes. I choose Styling and Class Toggle. For the name of the class, I use the Bootstrap class for the background color. For the condition, I equate the ID of the selected category to the ID of the data detail. I then repeat the process for the text color. The coloration part was a bit tedious, but the result will be surprising. Now on to the update part of CRUD. I use the second column to insert a form using generators. The server action is the category upsert. This time it is populated with the data from the data detail. I change the form type to vertical. In the field section, I change the ID field to be hidden and the long description to be a text area. An image is a beast to update. I will devote a whole lesson on the topic of uploading images and entering the name in the database. For now, I will delete this. Great. We now see the update form. Let's give it the recognizable one. When there is a successful update, we need to give the user a notification. As well as that, the data source needs to be updated. When no category has been selected, I want the form to be hidden. This is done in dynamic attributes where I choose to show the form only when there is data in the data detail data source. Now for the part where the ID needs to be changed to be a unique ID. I copy the INP bit and save the file. Then I go across to the search panel. Here I enter the details. When satisfied, I hit Replace All. Next comes the delete action. I select the update form and insert a new form below it, using the generators. The server action is categories delete. I populate it with the data detail data source. Only the ID is needed, the rest of the fields are removed. The ID input is hidden. The form undergoes the usual identification process. Scrolling down to dynamic events, I choose on the on-server success event. For the actions, there is the notification. The main data source is also refreshed to show the change. Lastly, there needs to be a confirmation pop-up when deleting a category. For this I go down to Static Events and choose Forms and Submit. For the action, I enter return return opening bracket. Anyhow, I will leave the expression below for you to copy. On second's thoughts, I want the delete button next to the update button. So, I remove it from the delete form. I select the update button and add a new after it. It gets the button treatment. Then I scroll down to Dynamic Events where I select the on mouse click event. For the action, I choose to submit the delete form. So far, the forms and buttons have been hidden from view. To overcome this, I turn App Connect mode off. Now we see that the delete button needs the corresponding text. Don't forget to save the file. Testing time. What can I say? Is this Wappler or is this me being a genius? Please do not answer. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode and to see you in the next video where the topic is images.